All right, good morning. Made it through some technical difficulties, but we're here. So, in the interest of time, just going to go over the economic calendar, economic outlook calendar. And today we had the core durable goods at 8:30, and at 10 we have the CB consumer confidence, where you may or may not see some sort of reaction to that news. But yeah, that's our economic calendar for the day, and we're just gonna get right into it. Not even really gonna do the just market pulse. We'll just go from here.
And picking up where you left off, we've noticed that overnight we've got an offer that comes in. We closed, well, yesterday, let's jump before that. At the close yesterday session, day session, we get a test of the lows, we bring it up to new highs, and we hold there to the close. Well, our offer likes to sit at that opportunity and take advantage of that, and we test the lows of the session. And now we come up into the morning, what is it, 3 a.m. my time, so to your time, we get a buyer to show up, bring it back up to test those levels where our seller's sitting on the offer. And we come to where we are now, where we're at that seller at the offer, not at it at price, but we're in the range. So that seller sitting on the offer, 120. So at 120, we're at 103 quarter, 103.50 now. We're testing our buyer who's supporting the market after that move to the passive seller sitting on the offer at 120. So right now we've got an offer in the market and we're testing our buyer. Our buyer is currently at 103 and 3/4, less than a minute before the open. Our buyer has been able to make pace, this 30 seconds in, and we're now stuck at a node here at 107.50 where we're finding resistance. Volume has moved down to 105. Market opens, we get a splash of offers that come into the market. Buyers ready there to absorb it, eating it. As a response, our seller is smashing the bid. We're getting a lot of participation coming to the short side and being reflected in the delta. As a response, our buyer is absorbing and eating that liquidity at the node down here at 97 halves. As a response, our offer is bringing more supply to the market. And we're seeing to the degrees of how our buyer is going to hold this. And they're back up to 97 halves. Price 94, 93, 94, 92. Buyer showed up at 93 halves and got smashed with another huge amount of supply that comes into the market. We're seeing a big pickup on both sides, retail and institution side going short. There's a mechanical area down here at 86. And we're seeing some absorption of some orders as the market is still hitting the sell side. Our buyer is using that 86 as support. We're now at 95, 96, 95. Seller is defending 93 halves. Most of the delta that has come in short off the open has been just fleeced out, and we've seen half of that erased on that move up from 86 to 93 halves. As a response, our seller's going back into the supply and is testing the 86 level. It's being pushed down to 85 halves. As the flow is coming through, we can see that there's a passive buyer just absorbing this volume, trying to keep price within this range. Again, most of this short delta is being unraveled, more than half. And as a response, just as I say that, we get more supply that comes in and tests the 85 halves. It's now moved to 85. We're now 84 halves. And back into it. Volume has now showed up down here at 89 to where our buyer is finding support. So we've got a mechanical level, 84 halves, and volume at 89. How's our seller going to respond? They're still hitting the bid. They're coming to the market with supply. It's nonstop. Both sides. Buyer at 80. Market at 78 quarter. 77 halves. Buyer at 77 3/4. Right when he shows up, we get a splash of sell orders that come in again, moving it down to 74. Buyer at 74. Taking on a lot of volume. We're seeing an increase in participation based off that 3-minute open that just printed.
They have plenty of room to run. We have a balance level about 10 points below the session low at 1541.5.
And we're very, very close to a level I was looking at yesterday, 62.25. That's the kind of entry to our liquidity pool of the big long-term participants from my perspective. And we're taking on a lot of supply here. Buyer still at 74, price at 69.25, 68. Okay, price is moving too fast. I can't keep up with it, so I don't like, giving the exact price, but we've got offers coming in. Now we're at 65. There's an attempt to get back to 74 where our buyer is. Let's see if our seller's going to defend that. We go from 64 to 72. Here we are. Our buyer is back into balance. And as a response, we get a huge amount of sell orders that come down and flush it back to 66 is where we got a response. Now we're at 63. There's the 62.25 level that I was looking at, and immediately testing that, we got a positive move up. Let's see if this level holds. This is a big, deep liquidity pool that goes from 62.25 down to 39.75. So we're going to need a lot of supply to push past this, and a lot of buyers just to completely move out of the way. That's not what's happening. Volume has moved down to 73. Our buyer is held 74, and price is moving up. 82 now, 83. And it looks like there's a fight for the close of this rotation, as our offer is really getting defensive, but they're getting eaten alive as our buyer is just absorbing all of the supply coming into the market. Also, I just want to make another note. That happened right after a touch of our liquidity at 62.25. Volume's at 80. When I say volume, I'm referring to the point of control. My point of control is going to be different than yours. I've got it set differently to really track volume as it's happening live. It's now at 73. Offer at 78.75. Market at 74. Market at 70. So we're seeing our seller's response to that buyer that just stepped in and absorbed massive amount of sell orders that came in down here. Most of it taking place at 74. Buyers now moved up to 78.75. And the delta has flipped on the retail side. Institution side just flipped double digits. just looking at it from an auction perspective, you know, we've got the high side 134 and a quarter down to 121 and a quarter. That's where our offer is sitting. Our buyer sitting on the auction block, and I'm referring to the 30-minute perspective, 67 3/4 down to, doesn't matter because we're not down there yet, but literally we got a touch of the upper auction block all the way back down on the open. Huge amount of buying that's come in since I last started squawking the price. Both sides of the market, it appears to be a position taking place or a big amount of profit taking on the seller who was sitting on the offer earlier. Just from price action, I'd say we got a position building here. Either people are going to get trapped, we get another savage move, or we're going to, let's just keep it to price. So volume at 80, offer at 82. As a response to all that buying that came in and started to position, the seller's getting more aggressive. Volume at 78.50. Offer still at 82. Market 80. Buyer still holding support of the move that they made previously and the position in accumulation currently. Testing the offer at 82. So that printed, what's going to be our response for our seller? They really have to push it down. Not only do they need to push it down, they need to do it quickly. And then not only that, but our buyer would have to completely pool the liquidity on the books to allow price to go down.
On the 1 minute perspective, they are painting the picture for a rollover. However, I'm not necessarily saying the same thing on it from a 3 minute perspective. So that we could see some a look below and fail, or we may even see the follow through, just looking at different possibilities.
Market at 78. Our seller is attempting to push it down, but they're not finding support on the retail side as there's a buyer just accumulating as they're trying to push down. So each time price is down here, they're only buying and accumulating into this. Yeah, the price action might be deceptive, but okay, and just as I said that, we get a huge amount of selling to come in. And the selling needed to push price further down. And which you were referring to as the rollover for that test. So now we've got a test of the mechanical level down here at 68. Just got pushed to 66. Definitely expect there to be some support there. Offer at 70. How's our buyer going to respond? They're taking on a lot of supply that they're having to absorb. Also, too, we've seen momentum decline a bit.
Yep.
Buyer's still holding 70. Price 75 now. Volume at 78. I'm not narrating this, but this is what's happening. This offer is attempting to push the market lower. Our buyers at 70, volumes at 78, and there's just a continual attempt to push the market lower. But we've got a buyer here who's absorbing price and keeping it in that range. As I'm saying that, our offer is getting a bit more aggressive and is now testing the buyer as price is at 68 and a quarter. So that just printed. Now our buyer has to respond. And as a response, they've pulled, and we're seeing more sellers come in. Huge amount of selling to get trapped at 65. I say to get trapped at 65 is because the moment those massive orders came in, price held there and is retraced. We're now at 71. The flow is only selling, but we've got a passive buyer who is moving price around because the flow is only selling. Yet we've got price, all right, as a response, we've got a huge amount of offers and supply to come in, test the 64.50 mechanical level, buyers at 65, and as soon as the buyer shows up, we get a massive amount of supply to come in and push lower. So what needed to happen to push price lower literally happened. We got the accumulation of sell side volume as participation within the last 6 minutes here, reflected in delta, and our buyer stepped out of the way. Now we're deep. We're not deep in the liquidity pool, but we're almost halfway there. Our buyer's still holding the pool though. 62.25 is the top. We're now at 62.25. Offer at 65. There was a note that was tested where we found support at 58 halves. That needs to be mentioned as price is definitely responding off of that level. There's a fight at 65 now.
And they're doing this.
Buyer, go ahead.
They're doing this very mechanically because I'm getting a response at all of my levels. And the response may be the time frame of the response is it varies, but I'm definitely getting a response at all the levels.
I 100% agree with you. I'm even noticing more with just it's insane, especially when volume shows up. Volume in the market, a lot is revealed. The value area highs, lows, all these, it's turning mechanical. So with that print, we got an increase in participation. It'll be the first time since the 2 opening prints. And a seller came in massively. Literally as a response to that, we have seen price move up 10 points. So hopefully you didn't sell at the bottom of that. That's kind of a textbook trap. As we're now moving outside the liquidity pool, price at 66.25, as the delta has flipped. Let's see how heavy it flips. Okay, volume at 69. So this is going to be a real test. Offer at 66.75, steps in front of it. Offer at 65.75. How's our buyer going to respond? There's a fight going on now. Buyer is coming in with inventory, and boom, massive push past volume. Only to find a passive seller sitting there. Let's see how the passive seller handles this. They're being tested big time at 71, now 73, back to 71. Most of the volume that we just saw come into the short side is literally flipped on this move. The lows of that move being 50, now we're at 70. Volume at 69. Buyer at 65.75 now. And our passive seller is, for the moment, holding back this buying and prices from continuing higher after that. On this move down, we're seeing a massive amount. Now we're seeing half of the buying that came in on that move just completely go away. Seller is now holding 65 and a quarter. They're sitting on the offer there. Our buyers are attempting to push through it. They're now at 66. We were just talking about these mechanical levels, and I was mentioning volume. The moment volume showed up at 69, everything stopped as our buyer came in to swoop and squeeze these shorts. All right, so that just printed. We're starting to see I'm starting to see where our buyer is passively putting a stop to the market. Let's see if they're going to continue this push up. That seller is still sitting on the offer at 66. We're seeing a response off of it. Buyer at 61 and 3/4. Accumulating in this selling flow. Buyer at 65 and a quarter. Sellers defending that level. So we've got the fight. Now volume's down here, 66. A lot of buying is coming in to attempt to push higher, but it's finding quite a bit of resistance as the passive selling sitting on the offer now, 65 and a quarter, is just eating that buying liquidity. They've got supply just sitting there as we've got participants buying.
Mm-hmm.
Now the flow is switched. Now we've got more selling coming into the market as we move down to the 56 area. As we get down to the 56 area as a response, our buyer just eats the liquidity, pushes it back up by 61. Buyer at 61 and 3/4. Testing volume now at 65. Still have our passive sellers sitting there and trying to accumulate in the buying that's coming in. That's being reflected by the delta. More participation coming into the short side as prices going down lower, 56 and a quarter. As a response, again, our buyer sitting on the bid here passively using this mechanical level at 58 is just, boom, just taking it right back up. Testing volume, now splashing through volume for moments, finding more buyers, and our passive seller just brings in more supply and dumps it back down, so we've got a fight down here. Buyer at 61.75. They've got a mechanical support level behind them at 58. And I should say offers also at 61 and 3/4 with the mechanical support level they're using for the sell side at 66, that being the volume point of control. Our battle is still taking place in this range. Momentum is declining also. That's not good if you're a seller. You need to be selling because there's a buyer who are absorbing all of the selling and accumulating in it.
Mm-hmm.
So we're at volume now. We're seeing a huge amount of delta come in on this move to the buy side, both markets, and we're beginning to push higher.
And looking at the
Offer at
volume
70.
profile, where just all of this is happening in a lot of noise. I'm not really looking for anything significant until we get back, if we get back up there around 81 or 82. That's only looking at it from a pullback perspective.
Mm-hmm. So since I've been silent, we've had the buyer attempt to break volume at 66. We got a lot of participation on both sides of the market jump in on that as a trigger and a signal. Offer shows up and absorbs all of it at 70 and brings the market back down into this range at 66 where we're continuing to battle out. But on both sides of the market, buyers are here and our seller as a response is eating this liquidity and has not left yet. But again, to note, we're seeing momentum decline. So our seller needs to make pace if we're going to continue to go down. As I say that, it looks like an attempt is being made. There is a node of support for our buyer at 61.75. We haven't yet touched that price yet. The battle is still happening at volume at 66. All right, there's the touch. Now what I would expect to see if we are going to go lower is a flip in the delta on both sides. If we see a massive amount of supply come in, that's what it's going to take, and our buyer has to pull their liquidity. Because if I'm a buyer and I really want to buy, I want to get the best price I possibly can. So if there's a huge amount of sellers coming, come on. I'm down here. But we're seeing participation decline since that offer came in. As a response to that offer coming in, there was a quick move up from 50 to 70. All right, so here we go. So that scenario that I was mentioning, we get a huge amount of supply to come in, and they've got a push that's happening. And our buyer has pulled their liquidity, allowed price to come back down. We're at 52. 53.50 is where our buyer's sitting. And they have now got a lot of sell orders trapped at 53.50, and we are squeezing up the price ladder, and it looks like we may even flip this rotation positive. It was positive for a quick second there, and as a response, the seller came in with a huge amount of supply, but our buyer's still here. 58.25 is the price. Our buyer's sitting on 53.50, but our offer is moving it back down. They're not giving up. Neither is our buyer. 59 now, 60, 61, 63, 64. We quickly saw a positive for the rotation, and quickly as a response our seller wants to come with supply. Now they've completely taken this thing positive and trapped 432 delta for the move. On the retail side of the market, the institution side here on the NQ is trapped also short, but just different numbers. Buyer's now at 64. Seller is trying to defend this. Okay, now if this prints, you've got to ask yourself, depending on what side of the market you are, I mean, that was a significant, it's like if you're looking at this as a board, and there's pieces on the board, and we've got to move around these variables that exist, this is a move right here. And it's high volume, so now we've got an increase in participation. This is a decision point here. So we've got an increase in participation come into the market to the sell side and attempt to break lower, and our buyer has stopped that. Not only have they stopped that, but they've got a bag here, quite a bit of shorts on both sides of the market. It's triple digits. They're still trying to sell. Let's see how our buyer responds, or if they're going to come in again with more supply. Always a possibility. Also, that sets the move for me to be looking for position. This print that just happened.
I'm still waiting for a position. I need more of a pullback to. I wanted it to pull back more than it did. So I did have a trigger or a signal, but I didn't like that setup, so I just skipped on it. So I won't. I'm looking for something much cleaner than what we're getting. Looks like we're attempting to break out of this range.
Yeah.
There it is.
As a response, there is more supply that came in. In fact, we're seeing the most supply to the sell side that we've seen since the open. Just happened right now for this move. Very interested to see how this prints.
And there's the mechanical response on that balance level.
Buyer at 43. Let's see where we are. We're testing now this buy liquidity pool. So the wall of it, the bottom of the pool is 39 3/4. We break below this. The only thing I have in front of this, or in front of this lower, is going to be a node all the way down at 1500. That's on my long-term charts. There's obviously a lot more, if you zoom in, but from a bigger perspective.
Yeah. That's where I got my levels in the same area.
And this move also too, as I said, if it was going to go down lower, we would need more volume to come in short, and they would have to throw supply. That's exactly what they've done. We've got an increase in participation on this move, as the most selling we've seen since the open just is taking place now. And we're just watching the buyer's response of holding it as much as they can at 43. And they appear to be doing that. Okay. Wow.
Whoa.
That happened so fast, how many words did you get out?
I looked down for a second and I missed it.
Literally. And this is just why there is, you've just got to be aware of just how quickly the game can be played. That was less than a second, and we saw 1,000 contracts traded at multiple prices. How does that work? Question to ask yourself.
Yep.
So there is someone down here with a lot of volume because they're absorbing nothing but selling, and they've taken on a lot of sellers to have price be where it is now. So let's see how this prints as we've got a buyer now just eating up all of the selling that took place, and we're almost seeing a full retracement on that second move that broke the lows and kind of dipped underneath my buying liquidity pool. There is an offer that's stopping this buying at 52 3/4. It's now moved to 48 halves. How's our buyer going to respond? They're trying to push deeper. Now we're at 55. Our offers now moved to 52 3/4. How's our buyer going to respond? They're trying to push forward. We've got an increase in participation on this. I wish I could have taken, it's very, see, that's a different conversation, but just the sequence of these actions very interesting. 100% a pattern, 100% mechanical. We're just watching sequences of movements as volume comes in and levels are tested as they go
Yep.
up and down the price ladder.
Yep.
And I think that was a brilliant play by our game maker.
It reminds me of like the way that they're running this. It's wholesale, but it also reminds me of like wholesaling for like retail arbitrage. If you're trying to go out and buy some stuff for to sell on eBay, like in that little last move, they was out collecting their inventory. They saw one more little item for sale, and they went and grabbed it. That was their cheapest item, so they could go back and sell it to the market at higher prices.
Literally, that's a perfect example. And I think if anyone could wrap their head around that concept, would really, it should just trigger you to understand a lot of how the movement is sequenced. There's a lot. It's a great concept. Okay, that print that just happened does set up another move for me depending on how we get a response and reaction to it. Our sellers still have supply. Offer at 41.50, price at 34. Let's see if our buyer is gonna actually defend the move that just took place. There's a fight for 41 halves. A lot of selling is being absorbed, which tells me that our buyer is happy to defend this level. What'll take prices moving lower is if we get an increase in participation to the sell side with supply and our buyer steps out of the way. Buyers defending the 41 halves level. We've been here for a while now. Just as I say that, we get a smash through with supply. We're now at 39, 37, 38, back to 40. So our buyer is absorbing quite a bit of selling and is still defending 41 halves. Just as I say that, wow, this is this is pretty intense.
Yeah.
This kind of action is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting. So now we're seeing supply come in. Guess what? It's the most that we've seen since the open in terms of the sell side as we are pushing lower. And it looks like we've rejected that buy liquidity pull from 39.75 to 62.25. There is definitely a lot of sell positions in that. Our next support zone on the longer time frame is the 1500. Let's see if we get down there. So that move just printed as we got an increase in participation. As I said, the only thing that'll take this thing down is if our buyer pulls the liquidity. They didn't even have to. There was so much supply that came in on that. Before we went live, Rob, you mentioned, hinting to this as a possibility for today. I'm gonna be honest, I'm a little bit shocked and surprised. I tend to stand on the position of these game makers are doing nasty, nasty stuff, and they're gonna kind of really, whatever you think is gonna happen, they're not gonna do that.
Yep.
And I feel like I'm on the opposite side here because I was not expecting them to come all the way down here to find liquidity. Now, what would be even more savage is at the end of the session, we're at all-time highs. Because they found a lot of shorts that have come into the market, put their orders on the books.
And as you say that, I'm glancing at Twitter just to see the sentiment of the overall market, and everybody's like quiet. I don't think anyone really expected this.
Which is, again, gives them props
Yep.
because they know. It's not even funny. I'm just laughing because I found that that's the magic to just stop frustration, anger, anything, keeps me balanced. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
gonna laugh at this
Yep.
shit. Fire at 508 or 8, I should say. Fire at 8. Again, taking on a lot of selling. The market's only selling at the moment. So this is absorption. Buyer moved to 15. Starting to see positive rotation for the print as we're now looking at 20. $16.50 is the level our buyer and seller are fighting for. Buyers defending it. Okay, so that printed. It's going to be our first kind of decrease in momentum and participation as that move happened. Everyone's got to react and respond and position for that just took place and printed.
Mm-hmm.
And with that last print as a response to it, there's a lot of indecision, but we can get an idea of what the areas where our buyer is supporting. And on the open of the next rotation, we saw an increase in participation come in. 1800 contracts traded now, but there's an offer sitting at 20. And they're absorbing the buying that is taking this as a trigger to go long by the dip. Offer at 1650 now. Buyer at 1350. So here's the battle. Are we going to see more supply come into the market and push this thing down, or a rotation in the sequence? So offers now at 1350. We're seeing a lot of sell side supply come in. There we go. There's the push. There's the volume supported by Delta, both sides of the market. And we're going down some more. We've got an increase now. They're piling up on each other. As soon as it starts to print on the charts with the Delta, a passive buyer comes in to do a little squeeze here. Still selling though. Yeah. We're getting very close to that node. Buyer now at 475. The moment they show up, we get a splash of orders that come in to the sell side. There we go. We get a touch of it. Huge amount of volume was transacted at that price in literally talking freaking nanoseconds. I can't see the exact size. I don't have the numbers showing, but it's definitely a great portion of the volume that we've seen take place in this last hour took place at that price in nanoseconds, and then traded below it for a splash, and now we're back, as that's a great pivot point for a little scalp. Buyer now at 474 3/4, defending it, following the touch of the 1500 level. Massive short side delta is being printed
Hmm.
since the open. A lot of short positioning.
And I just realized that you say that in that first 30-minute period, we touched negative 3,000 on the delta, which is very significant.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we've been at that much delta in a while on one side.
For the amount of volume that we saw come into the open, this action is very abnormal.
Hmm.
Very abnormal. They've really, and I believe, I'll definitely this weekend go through the data, but I believe a lot of what we're seeing today was set up by what we saw yesterday was
Yep.
also interesting action, as I believe what they were doing with just the flow of how they transacted volume was a data collection. It's almost like, yeah, I move prices around because I want to see.
Hmm.
I want to move the price up and down the ladder in a way where I just want to see. I don't care about returns or profits or anything like that. I just want to see. And this, I believe, what we're seeing today is the result of the data accumulation they did with the price action yesterday. I really believe that's what's happening, but that's just me.
Yep. I can see that.
So far, we're still seeing this sell side volume come in, supported by Delta, extremely heavy, especially on the retail side, and prices going down lower. My next node down here is I don't have one. I've got another liquidity pool. It's 72 and 3/4. This one's deep all the way down to 34.
I got a balance level at 937, but also keeping in mind that this is a whole number as well. So I would expect some response here, even though it looks like our sellers just trying to push right through it. And if that, if they are aware, it is price is being held here, so we do have some buying in this area. But that also means if our sellers are able to keep pushing it, then they're going to be squeezed as well.
Wow, so we just got in as you were talking. We're starting to see again levels of selling that is competing with the. Okay, so yeah, we're
Yep.
starting to see these levels of selling that are competing with our max selling that we've seen.
Yep.
There we
4,000
go.
on that
So
delta.
yeah, we just have seen the most selling that we've seen since the open. So this supply is not stopped. I also do want to bring up the fact that we were just talking about this pre-market. So it's
Right.
very interesting. I was saying how it doesn't matter. We'll get into that for
Mm.
maybe ideas in the future. But I do also want to note that where we just broke out of that liquidity pool, that was the liquidity pool that was a base for us for the last week. So last Tuesday when we were talking, and doing the squawk for price, that was our base range that we were bouncing from. And we just tested it. Here's a week later. We've broken through it. We're getting an idea of what was needed for price and flow to break through it. And we're now seeing it come into previous week's support. Where we are now, this liquidity pool 72.75 to 34, 72.75 to 34.75. Still seeing sellers come in, offer at 62.
And just thinking slightly ahead is something that just hit me. This is an interesting setup for tomorrow's afternoon FOMC
Oh yeah,
series of events.
exactly. Wow. These guys, man. These guys, gals, it's the AIs. I mean, it's when you can see them work, it's very clever stuff.
Hmm.
So we got a buyer at 60. Let's see what they do. They're moving price to 65, so we got 5 points here. Let's see how much they can do. Our passive offer still has a supply and they're just sitting on the offer, sitting on the bid. So in order for us to move higher, our buyer has to slam market orders in. And that's not, and even if they slam market orders in, our offer is sitting. So they've got the supply there. When you're slamming, they're just reloading. And we're getting a battle that's taking place here, and we're starting to see the degrees to which our buyers are going to protect this 60 level because they're accumulating their position to the buy side. We are inside this liquidity pool. It'd be interesting if we see a peak above it at 72 3/4. Or if our seller's going to do everything they can to keep us inside it. But we're, again, I do want to note, we're seeing a massive amount of buying coming in as a position to stop this, both sides of the market, and it's an increase in participation. So this is a move. And another thing that needs to be noted is too, what we're seeing today with each of these rotations that are being printed is an abnormal amount of high volume. And that's following a open that's not necessarily indicative or reflecting the high volume. It was very subpar. Okay, so that just printed. Our buyer stepped in. Everyone who can see this is looking at this. Our buyer's at 60. Their node's at 60. Offer at 69. Offer at 65. 64 3/4. So coming down to test this buyer. Let's see if they get there. There's a buyer passively absorbing this liquidity, so our seller's got to push and then pushing. There we go. It's interesting how these moves happen in nanoseconds where the chart can't even print that it touched it. I just see the volume show up there in huge amounts. All right, buyers moved up and it's defending 63 1/4. We're also seeing an accumulation on the buy side. On the retail side, institution side is still selling, but they're unwinding the sell position. They've now gone positive as the rotation has gone north. We're now at 70. I'd like to see if we can get past 72 3/4, which will get us out of the pool.
And I would definitely make sure. What I was gonna say, I would definitely expect to see some buyers sitting down here and looking to buy the dip, or however you want to phrase it. We are trading below all of my levels, something I refer to as deep space. That can be another video for another day to explain what I mean by that terminology. But we've had a lot of sell off, and eventually our sellers would be expecting to take some profit, and our buyers looking to get in at these what they may see as the lows, and take us back a little bit. But I am definitely short bias at this point, just based off the strategy.
It's been a while since we've seen a move like this.
Yep.
And my mistake, I misspoke. Right now we're at the levels that we were at last Tuesday. So these are the levels we broke through where that's the Monday. Actually, let me just go back here. I definitely misspoke.
So we took out a week's worth of trading within an hour.
Our buyers are making progress as we're seeing the delta really reflecting a positioning on both sides of the market. Ooh, really strong positioning now on MNQ, as a lot of participation is coming into buy the dip, and they're met by a passive seller at 77 halves. And we get a push into this seller. We're now at 82. There's a node right up above us, 87. We get a touch of it. Let's see what happens. we're finding resistance there. See if we get a push. Okay. Got a battle taking place at 84 and a quarter, so our market is up here. Offer sitting there. The buyers attempting to push through it. Finding resistance at the node 86 and 3/4. And it's very interesting how they printed this too. Very interesting how they printed this too, because very interesting. Put it on a great game, great gameplay, very deceptive with the movements of each movement to movement.
Really exciting to watch. That hour flew by, and I didn't realize that so much time had passed.
It did go by fast today, and I think that's just I want to just put this out for the stream before we go. Is I've always looked at the market as, if you've seen the movie The Matrix, and you can remember Tank sitting in front of the screen and just seeing the green coming down. When you look at the order flow of these markets, especially the indexes, I guess you can make the argument for big commodities like gold too, is it's just a reflection of people.
Yep.
I would argue that the world moves under the illusion, this narrative of currency and flow of money. Well, we're watching the flow right here. And if you watch the flow, or what I call the code, just come down as they sequence these moves, and you listen to the news as the narrative that's just reflecting that, you really get an interesting perspective in terms of the matrix code. So also too, I think it really supports your idea of time moving the way it did, because I completely agree with that. That hour just flew by.
Yep. Definitely.
And I would say reflected in the code.
Yep. Exactly. All right. Well, good session.
Yep.
Took a lot from it. So it's going to conclude for today's session. So hope you have a good rest of your day.
Absolutely. Good luck for the rest of the week. You'll be streaming tomorrow, so I'll see you tomorrow.
Yep. See you tomorrow.